Tonight, Governor Pritzker has launched his re-election campaign. We meet one of the Republicans, hoping to unseat him. CPS is losing students at an alarming rate and could look vastly different in 10 years. Will more schools have to shutter? And how you can personally have a political impact. The organization coaching voters on how to call and demand things from their elected representatives.
Welcome to the Chicago Report. I'm Paris Schutz. Some fiery moments between Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio today, and whether or not the U.S. is at war. Duckworth repeatedly asked Rubio about the Alien Enemies Act, invoked as a pretext to conduct mass deportations. Now, Duckworth questioned Rubio on the use of this act, and Rubio and Duckworth tussled for about 5-6 minutes about whether or not it was needed to deport illegals and whether the war in Venezuela really is a declared war.
These groups have waged war on the United States. They have waged, for example, Train Agua is not just a criminal gang presence in our street. It is a criminal gang directly responsible for narco-trafficking.
The Trump administration has acknowledged that the vast majority of the men it rounded up and deported to torture under this law had no criminal records whatsoever.
We didn't torture anybody.
Over 75%.
Who did we torture? We haven't tortured anybody. We've arrested people that are members of gangs and we've deported them. We don't want gang members in our country.
Have found that many of the men were here legally. If the administration is willing to lie about who it's targeting under this law, what protections do totally innocent people have against abuse? Again, I want to ask you, will you advise the president to rescind his invocation of the Wartime Alien Enemies Act?
No, of course not. I mean, these are people that are threats to the national security of the United States.
Now, Rubio appeared before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on the Hill. Although immigration and deportation are under the purview of the Department of Homeland Security, this exchange seemed to be more about the Secretary of State's role in deporting U.S. residents to foreign detention centers like in El Salvador. Now, the exchange drew comment from the vice president. In an attempt at humor, J.D. Vance tweeted, quote, "Watching Tammy Duckworth obsessively interrupt Marco Rubio during this hearing is like watching Forrest Gump argue with Isaac Newton." And also today, the Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer revealed a list of revisions his party would like to see to DHS to get Democratic votes onto a funding package. Namely, he wants mandates that immigration agents not wear masks and that they show IDs. And he wants more targeted enforcement with agents presenting warrants. If no agreement on DHS funding by Friday, then there will be a partial government shutdown. Chicago City Council member Byron Sigcho Lopez is running for a demotion, a.k.a. he's filed to run for Congress. The 25th Ward Alder missed the deadline to file in the Democratic primary as incumbent Jesus Chuy Garcia announced he would not run in the last hour of the last day for filing. That paved the way for his chief of staff, Patty Garcia, to jump into the race. So Sigcho Lopez will run as an independent, and he says the stakes couldn't be higher.
It is important that as elected officials we are honest and we're truthful to our constituents. And the fact of the matter is that this was an exit that was not controversial. It was unethical. And I think it's important that we start in this moment in time where our communities, our cities, our constituents are being attacked, dehumanized, criminalized, kidnapped, or murdered, that we are truthful, that we work with constituents across the board, suburban and urban areas. I've talked to many people across the 4th Congressional District, and there's a need to represent their interests or the public interest, the interest of working people and not a billionaire class.
And believe it or not, we are only weeks away from early voting here in the 2026 primary election. There's so many contested races to think about, and one of them is the race for governor. J.B. Pritzker is uncontested on the Democratic side, seeking a third term, but several candidates are vying to be the nominee on the Republican side. And tonight we meet one. Ted Dabrowski, North Shore businessman and former policy analyst and head of the publication Wire Points. Ted Dabrowski, welcome.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
Thanks. Thank you, Paris.
I've known you for many, many years from your work with the Illinois Policy Institute and then Wire Points. It came from a more libertarian perspective, advocating for small government and very critical of public employee unions. Is it fair to say that these are still your North Stars here in running for governor? Well,
my North Stars really make Illinois a top 5 state again. We used to be a great state, and right now we're a bottom 5 state for job creation, for wage growth, for economic growth. So we need to totally dramatically change how we're doing things. And so people can't afford to live here anymore. We're losing people. We're shrinking in population, with the exception of the illegal immigration that's coming in. So we have a lot of work to do to turn around this state and make it a top 5 state.
How do you do that? What are the top 5 things you can do to do that kind of turnaround?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, we have to change the culture. We have to change the thinking. Right now, we continue to just hike taxes under Governor Pritzker. The last 7 years have seen us 5th worst in job creation, 4th worst in economic growth, and 6th worst in wage growth. So we have to flip everything that he's doing and that the legislature is doing so that we do things differently. So a lot of that is cutting spending, bringing the taxes down, and bringing back jobs. We are not creating jobs. So we have a huge work to do with the legislature, which is Democrat controlled. They own all the problems. We have to then work together to flip that.
When Governor Rauner, a Republican, was in this job, you were at the Policy Institute, which again was very, it was advocating for right to work and the end of so much influence from public employee unions. Is that something you would advocate for, right to work and public employee unions not having as much political power as they have?
Well, Paris, we have probably the strongest public unions in the country, and Chicago Teachers Union is a perfect example of that, right? It's huge, militant. It's running the city now. It's spiking up costs. It won't let schools that are empty shut down. It has so much power, and the same thing at the state level. So we're going to have to bring back power between the ordinary people who pay for those public unions and the public unions themselves, because right now they have all the power, and ordinary people are either forced to pay more or leave.
Now, you haven't held public office before. We mentioned you've done all this policy work. Governor Pritzker has almost unlimited funding. How do you go up against that?
Well, I think people are probably tired of Governor Pritzker. This will be a 3rd term for him. We've seen the illegal immigration problems in Chicago. There are people in the black community not very satisfied with him. Obviously, they've been very vocal. And you look, when you have the highest property taxes in the country, we saw where they were burning their property tax bills on the west side. Pritzker and the legislature have done nothing about that. You've had the outmigration. We continue to lose people. Under Governor Pritzker, we've lost more than 450,000 people. Sorry, we've lost more than 300,000 people. The only reason we're having any kind of benefit is the big surge in illegal immigration. So Caterpillar headquarters left, Boeing headquarters left, Citadel took its
Ken Griffin,
Ken Griffin and all his people, Tyson Foods, Morton Salt. I mean, the fact that you have these amazing, amazing companies leave Illinois has to say something. And a guy like Warren Buffett said a few years ago, I will never invest in Illinois because they have so much pension debt that they'll just tax me forever. I'm not going there.
We do know that the pension debt is a crisis, has been for many, many, many years. The Supreme Court in Illinois ruled you can't curtail any of them. So what's the solution? What's the way out?
I think the big message for the rest of the country is that we're going to finally stop digging the hole bigger with more pensions. So we need to move to 401ks for all new workers, all new government workers, starting tomorrow, right? Which would be legal, it would be constitutional, and we finally stop digging the hole. And look, everyday Illinois have 401ks. Our government workers, starting tomorrow, should have the same thing. And we get some fairness and some affordability. And frankly, for me, if I were a government worker, I would want my own 401k. I wouldn't want my retirement security to be based on Illinois politicians that have made a mess of retirement security.
Although I don't want to get too much into the weeds, that could be tricky because some of the pension funding comes from the younger employees paying into the pension system. So what happens?
Same problem. It's the same problem. It doesn't matter what product we have. We just have to stop doing pensions because all they do is get bigger and bigger and bigger, and we have no control.
And it's clearly the state's not really paying all of those pension bills.
Right.
All right, you mentioned immigration. Are you supportive of the Trump deportation policies that have played out in Minneapolis and here in Chicago, Operation Midway Blitz, which the data shows it wasn't primarily violent criminals that they detained. It was pretty much any folks that they found without citizenship.
Listen, I'm very worried about Chicago and crime overall, right? We've led the country in Chicago. We've led in murders, total murders, 14 years in a row now. And we have not done well with crime with Brandon Johnson, Kim Foxx, and others. So crime is a big issue. And the sanctuary laws are harboring criminals here as well. And so I'm really disappointed in our sanctuary state policy and sanctuary city policy. That's the big issue. And Governor Pritzker and Brandon Johnson keep supporting that. We should be like other states, like Florida, like Tennessee, like Indiana, where local law enforcement coordinates with federal. Just turn over the bad guys right to the federal authorities. Let's not have our bad guys going out in the streets and force ICE to chase them down. That's the real problem. We should join the other states that aren't sanctuary states, work with the federal authorities, and end this crazy stuff on the streets. But that's one. Two, Governor Pritzker has called the federal law enforcement Nazis, jackbooted thugs, racist. He's inciting people to act badly. And that whole combination is why we should just end the sanctuary city, sanctuary state policies and work with the federal government.
I know on the subject of crime, you are not a fan of the Safety Act,
That's right.
The elimination of cash bail. Assuming you want to go rescind that, how do you do that when you look at the makeup of the General Assembly, which is it's likely going to be majority Democrats for a long time?
Yeah, it's going to be that for a while, and we'll have to keep making the case to the people. When I'm governor, I will have to run a 4-year campaign explaining to the people that if they want more change, lower taxes, less crime, get rid of the Safety Act, I'm going to have to go to the people and say, these are the legislators that won't change things. You have to decide to boot them out of office. At the same time, I have to work with them in those legislators and say, hey, look, we can't have the worst crime in the country or the biggest murder total. We can't be that state. We should be a great state where people want to stay here and thrive and not flee.
Speaking of staying here and thriving and not fleeing the bears, would you support the mega projects legislation that would give them the ability to negotiate their tax rate so they don't leave?
Yeah, so I've been out in public and say, I can't say all this about too high taxes, people suffering and struggling, and then say we should support giving big money to a football team. I love the Bears. I want them to stay here. I want them to be in Chicago. So I'm very cautious about any kind of package other than the general public funding that we might do for infrastructure, which benefits everybody. I'm for that. But I don't want to give any special deals that hurt everyday Illinoisans even more for any big company.
All right, Ted Dabrowski, formerly of WirePoints and the Illinois Policy Institute, running for governor on the GOP ticket. We are going to have a GOP gubernatorial forum here coming up next month, so mark your calendars for that. We'll tell you more about that in a little bit, and we'll see you back here then.
Hey,
Ted
we can
Dabrowski.
do better, so thank you, Paris.
All right,
we can do so much better.
All right. Well, you feel like things are overwhelming these days and you want to make a difference, but you're not sure how. 5 calls. It's making waves on social media, and in the wake of the deadly shooting of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis, it's an app that helps constituents contact members of Congress. So influencers, activists, everyday people wade into public policy conversations. Many are turning now to 5 calls to streamline civic engagement. So it works by aggregating contact information, giving users a direct line to local and federal officials to urge action, and things to that nature. So joining us now is Nick O'Neill, who is the founder of 5 Calls. Nick, my younger producers were telling me about 5 Calls, that this is blowing up all over social media. Influencers are talking about this. Give us the basic premise behind 5 Calls.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's a lot of information out there that's hard to understand when it comes to legislation in Congress. But what we do is we take all the things that you can find in various places, your legislators' phone numbers, who your legislators are. If you don't know who they are, you just put in your zip code. We talk about legislation, what legislation does and does not do for you, and then we give you a simple script to read. So we sort of tell you how this phone call is going to go when you call your legislators. We put that all together in one simple package, and it really helps people understand what the process is of calling your legislators and giving your opinion. So combining all those things together in an app or a website, you can use either of those things, makes it really easy for people to contact their reps about things that they care about.
So tell me about that script. What are you advising people to say when they call?
It's a really simple thing, maybe a sentence or two, just specific legislation that you support or what you can, what you would want your legislator to do for you, and then saying, hey, I live in this particular district, I'm a constituent of yours, and then you just thank them and move on with your day. A lot of people think that people are going to be combative, they're going to argue with them, that sort of thing. It's nothing like that. They just want to tally your call. It's going to be an intern on the phone. They want to tally your call and they want to move on with their day.
And I was kind of browsing the website. Give us a sense of the top issues here that people are seeking advice on in terms of calling their lawmakers.
We try to respond to what's popular, what's out there right now. So obviously Minneapolis and ICE is a huge topic for people right now. We've seen more than 700,000 calls in just the last week. And most of that stuff has been on ICE and making sure that ICE is A, not funded in the budget, or B, that you protect your communities from ICE's impact in your particular local community.
And obviously that is the issue of the day, I mean, that framing of it seems to skew more to the left. So is your organization helping people regardless of ideology, or is it more one side over the other?
Oh, we certainly have a progressive bend to our topics, but I'd say that they're broadly popular, as you can see with people blowing up on Instagram with wanting to call your legislators on this thing. People really care about this topic. We certainly don't subscribe to any particular political party, but we support voting rights, and of course we support members of your community not being unjustly killed on the streets.
Have you seen results? Are there certain lawmakers that have responded to some of this?
We do, and we see it in subtle ways that you don't necessarily expect. Certainly in this political climate, we don't really expect members of either political party to change core tenets of what their political party believes in. But we think that we can make real progress by taking specific parts of legislation that are really harmful and trying to get those removed from bills that may be inevitably passed.
It seems like the idea of this is the fact that, democracy is participatory. Many people don't even vote, but voting is the very base level thing that one can do. One does have the ability to interact directly with their elected representatives. Is that why you did this, to give people the notion that, it's not that difficult? I think a lot of people would think, well, it's just too daunting. Washington, Capitol Hill, I can't do that.
Exactly. So you would think of this as maybe like a first step. If you're not sure of who your legislator is, or you don't know sort of what the topics are, you can use 5 calls to get involved and understand yourself what's going on and who your legislators are. And then at the end of the day, when it comes to voting time, you can remember those things you called about and look up, did your legislator support you in that? Did they vote for it or against it? How does that affect whether or not you want to vote for them again or you want to vote for somebody else?
Very interesting concept. Talk about how you're spreading the word here, because as we mentioned, influencers are out here talking about this. Is that how you get people to really adopt this, is getting it out there through the influencers into the bloodstream?
Absolutely. It's all word of mouth. We don't do a whole lot of marketing ourselves or advertisements. Really, we rely on the fact that people care about these issues deeply themselves and in their communities. And if they call the representative and say, hey, I really believe about this, they're going to tell their friends, you should do the same thing. And that's how we spread on social media or in public or at protests, anything like that.
How many people would you say in total, if you had to guess, have utilized this app and have been making calls based on the work that the help that you're giving them?
Certainly a million since we've started in late 2016. I think the numbers for our unique users who have made a call over the last 4 weeks are in the 300 to 350,000.
And what about on the state level? I mean, is it just Washington or state, local, your school board?
It's even more impactful at the state level, right? So you think about, your House rep is getting, we see people in the Chicago area getting somewhere between 500 and 1,000 calls from their constituents from 5 calls in the last, let's say, 4 weeks. Senators about 12,000. When you reach down to then the state level, you're getting even less than that. So if you organize, let's say 10, 20 of your friends to call your local representative, that is your state legislator representative, they're not getting many calls from constituents at all. You barely understand who these people are or what issues they're facing. So we also have ways that we can support legislation at the state level and give you your information for your state legislatures. And then you can call them and give them your information. Sometimes you reach them directly on the phone. It can be a little bit more intimidating when you're calling someone and they are the person answering. But we really want to help people do that in the states as well, because they do not hear from their constituents very often. All
right, Nick O'Neill from 5 Calls. Very interesting concept here. And democracy is certainly a participatory sport when it's working well. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And up next, dropping enrollment. It's not a new problem for CPS, but it is getting worse. We run the numbers. A new study out concludes Chicago Public Schools is losing a staggering 10,000 students every year, and that adds up to 100,000 in the last 20 years alone. So how low will the population go, and can the city turn this decline around? Joining us now is Hal Woods of the group Kids First Chicago, who put out this report. Hal, good to see you. I see you at CPS board meetings. I know how active you are in CPS issues. What is the chief reason that your study found that schools are eroding so much population?
We've been studying this issue for a while. We've seen that first declining births. So we've seen about half the number of babies being born in the city of Chicago than 20 years ago. That's across all racial ethnic groups. We've seen a decline in in-migration. That was obviously buoyed in the last couple of years. We had 9,000 new migrant students that came to CPS that kind of kept CPS enrollment flat. That's not happening anymore. And we've also seen other situations where gentrification, particularly in Latinx communities, you've seen Pilsen, Logan Square, folks are getting priced out. They might be moving to other communities, might be leaving the city altogether. We've also lost over 250,000 Black Chicagoans over the last 20 years as well.
And that out-migration really impacting CPS. Where are those families moving to, and are they moving because of the school situation?
I think it's a litany of reasons. There's not a single reason why folks are leaving the city. Typically, they don't move that far. They might be moving to some of the Collier County, some of the suburbs, maybe even Northwest Indiana, even to the Milwaukee area, Southeast Wisconsin. But we do see that continued population loss. And again, people having fewer children than they did in years past as well.
Now, Mayor Johnson and CTU have slammed the idea of school closures. They're very critical of when former Mayor Rahm Emanuel closed dozens of schools. That was, what, in 2012?
2013.
2013. How does this system go forward without shrinking?
Yeah. I think, what we look at is it's the student experience. I think, certainly you can look at this from economic reasons. Others have done so. When we look at the data, though, the 10 lowest enrollment schools in CPS, we're spending $40,000, $50,000, sometimes $60,000 per student, but a combined budget of about $30 million. And so you look at CPS having a $500 million plus deficit for next year. That's not going to be a panacea for the district's budget problems. However, I think what we often don't hear is the student experience. Right? We hear it anecdotally sometimes, a student in a media article saying, I love journalism, but I don't like taking it 3 years in a row. I'm bored at school. And you see that with absenteeism information, right? We've got very, very high number of students that are missing school.
We covered that a couple days ago.
Yeah, students that are missing school. We hear, we see in the data with student surveys about low connectedness to schools and to peers. And so, but we're not actually elevating what is it like to go to a school with 100 kids, 25 kids in a class. You can't do sports, you can't do extracurriculars, you don't have drama. Some of the things that kind of make it a rich, well-rounded school experience.
And again, though, given this, the toxicity of the notion of closing schools and consolidating, there really is no way forward if this trend is going to continue for this system without closing or consolidating more schools, is there?
I think it's something that, especially as we transition to elected school board, fully elected school board next January, we've seen some school members raise this issue and the need to begin looking at it. We know there's a moratorium on school closures. That was part of elected school board legislation. It was part of the prior board actually passed a resolution kind of prohibiting closures until the new board came in. But it's something that, whether it's closures or whether it's being adaptive to this declining enrollment, whether that might mean shared services in terms of teachers being able to be at multiple schools in a certain geography. These are things the district needs to look at. And I think for us, the crisis is not just that we're losing student enrollment. The crisis is that there is no plan. There's no public conversation and dialogue about what to do.
No, and CPS has been lost in a mire of political battles and this transition now from appointed to elected school board. Now, maybe when there is a fully elected school board, there'll be a coherent, maybe long-term plan here for the system. But it does also seem to hinge on folks wanting to stay in the city to raise their kids and send them to public school, because how many times do we hear the young families say, I want to stay in the city, but I can't afford private school and I just don't trust CPS, so we're going to move to the suburbs. Is there any chance to turn that notion around? How does this school system attract more families and make CPS an attractive option?
I think that's what we found in the report that was really an anomaly. In past years, we looked at enrollment, we were losing 10,000 students a year, as you pointed out, but CPS is market share. So again, that percentage of students, school-age children in the city of Chicago that go to CPS was about constant, about 75%, 3 out of 4 students, school-age children were going to CPS. That's declined, about 5% over the last roughly 5 years. Started a little bit before the pandemic. It has exacerbated since the pandemic. And so if we still had those students, if we were still getting 75%, we'd have 18,000 more students in CPS. And now we don't. 18,000 that's a bunch of elementary schools, high schools, et cetera. And so there is a question for CPS. How do we attract families back to CPS, or maybe folks that have left CPS? Again, there's no exit survey for why a family isn't part of CPS, but it could be quality, could be stability. Right. There's a litany of reasons.
I would think that the coming school board members are going to have to dig into that as their first, second, third, fourth, and fifth priorities here. Assuming nothing changes, how low will this population go?
I think it's hard to project in terms of demographic. I'm not a demographer, admittedly, but I think if we continue to see an erosion of families in CPS and erosion of our tax base with fewer families, that's going to put a disproportionate. We know that 60% of CPS funding comes from property taxes, and so those that remain will have a higher burden moving forward. And so it's incumbent on the city to keep families that are already here, but also attract new families as well.
All right, Hal Woods, Kids First. You did this study, fascinating study, very, very important issue here going forward, not just for CPS, but for the entire city. How can you have a thriving city without a thriving public school system? Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that is it for us tonight. Stay warm, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with all the news that you need to know. Catch up on all the rest on fox32chicago.com and with the Fox Local app. Good night.